Hi there, 6643. We are now embarking on weeks 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's crazy that we're moving at this pace. We've actually learned a lot of information so far, and we're going to be moving on to even more pertinent information. So this overview is going to be going over all of that material and all of that content, what's expected of you, as well as project number 2. In fact, I'm going to start off with project number 2 and then move into the weeks modules. So my recommendation is to start off listening to project 2, then listen to week 4 content and overview, and then go into week 4 content and do the task and the learning. Then go back to the video, listen to the overview, go into the content, do that work. Week 6, go into the overview, and then go into the content. And then same for week 7. And if you guys have any questions about anything I present, again, make sure that you reach out to me. So I am going to go ahead and get us started. All right. So for this next couple weeks, I want to first just go over what we've learned so far. There's been a focus on the initiatives that are pretty pervasive within our special education world, then, and just in education in general. And they drive how our schools function and the pressures kind of that come from the top down, and the decisions that are made that impact our teaching and things that we see and do in our classrooms and overall student learning. So, and that will actually, you actually saw in week 2, which is what are they envisioning with all these initiatives? What is it that they want our students to look like when they get out of high school? And what is it that they want them to look like in high school? Or not in high school, in K through 12. And then we had some information on SLD. I wanted to give you guys that because I want you to think about and refocus on that specific population of students, as that is the largest piece of the special education pie. 33% of the students who are in special education are SLD or fall under SLD. So refocusing that, there are other disabilities, as you and your groups have talked about and researched. However, what I would strongly recommend is for you guys to really think about how all of these different disabilities and disability categories fit in to this vision that our nation and our state has for all students. And how are we going to get them there, right? So in week 3, you learned about the Common Core State Standards, which is what our state and our nation wants our students to learn. And then we learned about differentiated instruction and accommodations. And we learned about what those are, so you can understand how they are used and implemented within the classrooms to give access to students so they can be 21st century ready learners and communicators and college and career oriented people. So in weeks 4 and 5, 6, and 7, we talk about the how. How do we get our students there, right? Well, in week 4, we dive into expert learning and learner variability. Expert learning is very similar to that 21st century learning and being college and career ready. However, it's what we see our students, where we want our students to be even before they graduate high school. So then we dive into learning about learner variability and how there's different learners, and how are we supposed to get our learners to become expert learners? Understanding again that there is this variability of learners that especially we are going to be responsible in supporting and working with and getting them to become expert learners and 21st century ready students. So by understanding those concepts a little bit more differently, then we can figure out really how to purposefully get our kids to be there and get there. And what we're going to talk about, since we are mild to moderate educators, and we often push into those tier one universal settings, is universal design for learning. And although I want to say that universal design for learning is typically seen as a tier one level of instruction, we use it all the time, and we should use it all the time in tier two and tier three and in special education classrooms. So one of the things to think about when you're learning about universal design for learning is, how does it differ from differentiated instruction and accommodations? And if you can figure out that nuance, you got it, right? And there's a little part towards the end that helps you differentiate that, but look for that. What is that difference? They're very similar, but they are different. So make sure you look for that. Then week 7, we tie it all together. Okay, so now I'm going to go into our modules, and as promised, I'm going to talk about our project number 2 first. This is a collective effort. Give me one second. For project number 2, you're going to be really looking at these 6 different yet interconnected initiatives, frameworks that we see and hear about often in education. That's MTSS, RTI, UDI, differentiated instruction, individualized education plans, and accommodations. What I want you and your group to do is to tell me how these are different yet the same, and how are they connected to each other. They are often worked on in silos because you have different committees working on them. However, they're all tied together and they all affect each other. It comes top down. And then what often happens is schools are mandated to do a certain thing. Principals are asked to implement something. And then we get this push to use a certain curriculum, use a certain strategy, focus on a particular set of students, etc. So all of those decisions come mostly from many of these initiatives. I didn't include ESSA on here, and that's another huge one. So if you want to think about also that, I would encourage you to look into the ESSA as well, as it will really, really help you tie it all together. But for the sake of this assignment, you'll be talking about these 6 and how they connect. And to submit it to me, you're going to either write a 2 or 3 page paper with your team, or a 7 to 10 minute video, or a narrated PowerPoint with 15 to 20 slides. That's going to be 75 points of the 100. You do have to use APA style. That's going to be 5 points, at least 2 scientific journals. That's going to be 10. And you do need to rate your members in your group. 0 to 10, and doing that rating is worth 10 points. I do realize I did not do that for project number 1, which is okay, but we will be doing it for this next project. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I will now be moving into module number 4, or week 4. Again, this is going over expert learning, learner variability, and how all of this ties together with the modules that we learned about before in regards to being college and career ready and being 21st century learners, and using systems like MTSS and RTI to get our kids there, right? So we're going to be learning a little bit more about this week, and we're going to start off with watching Todd Rose's Myth of the Average. then reading an article and chapter 2, then watching another video that is going to talk a little bit more about digital promise, and then look into and read chapter 3, then watch Guru Katie Novak's mini presentation on expert learning, and you're going to complete your second learning reaction report. So for this first video, again, it's going to be Todd Rose, and I want you to tell me, you're actually going to now begin to embark on universal design for learning. So in watching Todd Rose, he's going to tell you the purpose of UDL, why UDL, and how we have learner variability in our schools, yet though we don't have a system that is built for all of that variability. And so what we need is universal design for learning to be able to build a plane that's going to be accessible to all students. So you'll start there. You'll start with the why of UDL and start learning about learner variability. Then you're going to get into this article, UDL, Learning in the Brain, that talks about the brain, the neuroscience behind that. So it begins again to talk about learner variability. You'll move into reading chapter 2, which again goes into expert learning. So now we're going to dive into expert learning. What is this expert learner? And then what I want you to do is you're going to watch this video. It's Failure to Communicate. And it's, I believe, a 12-minute video. It's really good. And it shows you a teacher reflecting on her work and using another peer to help her reflect on her work and build a classroom that was a one-size-fits-all into a universal design for learning classroom that made learning instruction, I should say, so much more efficient that it improves student learning. So you'll watch that video. It's really good. Then you're going to read chapter 3. So this goes into learner variability. I really should have switched it the other way, but since the book has it laid out this way, I definitely wanted to just be mindful of that and kind of have a little fidelity to the structure of it. So I'm gonna have you guys learn about learner variability afterwards, and then we're going to go into Katie Novak's expert learning, and she's gonna give you a little bit more information about that, and she ties it to 21st century learning. Then you're going to be done. You're going to go into the learning response for this following week. And that's going to be you synthesizing the information from weeks 3 and 4. So from week 3 from the previous module and this week here. And that, I believe, is going to be due February 21st. All righty. So week 5, and I'm actually going to do, oh no, student view is not going to work because this is not yet published. So here we go. All right. So week 5, now we're getting into UDL. We're going to learn about the 3 principles that recognize universal design for learning and that help individuals become expert learners. So these are the big drivers. This is what builds that framework, are these 3 principles. So you're going to watch my UDL overview, read chapter 4, look over the UDL guidelines. Then you're going to watch 4 videos that compare and contrast UDL and differentiated instruction. So I asked you guys to think about, how is UDL different from DI? These 4 videos are going to tell you just that. Okay, so then you're going to complete a quiz. And remember, these quizzes are mandatory, as it will eventually affect your grade. Although I might give you a 10 or a 9 or whatever the grade is for your learning reaction report, eventually I will go back and look at the quiz, and I might have to go back and reduce those points if you did not complete the quiz. So the quiz is super important. Optional though, is going to be this review on CASP resources. So let's get started. I want to note that there is no learning reaction report due for that. So you're going to look over this UDL overview video that I developed, and it's going to go over the guidelines and what all of those are. And it's going to kind of begin to give you an idea of how this framework is put together and built. You're going to move on to reading chapter 4 that digs into the 3 principles, which is let me show you. Providing multiple means of engagement, providing multiple means of representation, and providing multiple means of action and expression. So understanding what I really want you to get from this review is understanding that there's 3 principles, and under each one of the principles, you have guidelines. There are 3 different guidelines for each one of the principles. And what you'll see is that they're actually organized by the way that we learn them and how we learn them. So thinking about the science of learning, we think first, we have for engagement, for example, we have to recruit interest. Once we recruit interest, we can build on that interest. And then once we build on that interest, let me make this a little bit bigger, we can internalize it. Once we've internalized it, we can develop, now we are expert learners who are purposeful and motivated. And this is what you would have learned about in week 4, as far as expert learners, right? And then for multiple means of representation, there's these 3 different guidelines. Under each guideline, there are checkpoints, right? So again, if we have students who are, they cannot access the information, we have to think, what is another way that we can represent information? First of all, we have to give them that access. Once we give them access, then we can start to build on it using options for language and symbols. Once we give them that, then we can provide options for comprehension so students are resourceful and knowledgeable. We do the same thing for the 3rd principle, which is action and expression. So first we start by giving access with physical action, building on that by giving students an ability to express and communicate, and then helping them with their executive functioning so they can be strategic and goal oriented, right? Then we're going to move on to this 4th video. And for this 4th video, let's see. It is Katie Novak, and she's going to discuss more on the difference between universal design for learning and differentiated instruction. Okay, so this is how. So what you're going to do is you're going to watch that. I want you then to watch Larry, and this is not that long of a video. Let me see, how long is that? So video. And then you have Larry Ferlazzo's perspective on the difference between UDL and DI. And then this great video that has been used in many different trainings. Katie Novak uses it also on what's the difference between UDL and DI. However, while Gary talks about this, pay attention to, now you kind of get to know what the difference is after hearing Katie Novak. Listen to this guy, right? And then you can see what is that nuance that you pick up on. Now that you know the difference between UDL and DI, and you'll get that from Katie Novak up here, where does he make this switch in his video, right? He starts to explain a dinner party. When does it switch from being a UDL dinner party to a DI dinner party? Then there is this cool video on the difference between UDL and DI. So I want you guys to go ahead and watch that. You are going to take a quiz. on UDL versus DI. I don't care if you get 0%. The point is for you to take it and check your understanding. For participation, I want to make sure that you guys are understanding some. And if not, then I can go back and do some reteaching, right? Optional is going to be looking at these resources. Here's a CAST website, and it has all kinds of cool information on the UDL framework. What I'd really like to do, so I want to show you these guidelines, because I have these pinned in under the review where I give you guys a section for guidelines. But what I want you to see is how you can individually click on them, each guideline, right? And each checkpoint, and it'll give you a description of what it is. And then it gives you also some strategies to support learners, right? And then it'll give you some other checkpoints to keep going on. So it's very neat. All right, so you have now completed the information and the learning and activities for week 5. We're going to continue this next module next week. And just remember, review your notes, as the next learning reaction report is going to need to consist of some of this material, and it is due the 7th. And this week is when project 1 is due. All right, we are now going to be moving on to week 6. So for this week, we are going to continue to learn about UDL, but in regards to the affective brain networks. So we're going to explain how these 3 networks guide the UDL principles of engagement, representation, and action and expression. So we're going to have you read, so I'm going to have you read chapter 5. Then you're going to watch Dr. Mary Helen Immortal Yang's Neuroscience and Education. Then you're going to watch, read, and participate in Lanco's UDL Bootcamp section 4. It's a very specific section. I don't want you to get lost, so make sure you pay attention to this part when I go over it. Then watch a video on some case studies in UDL, and you're going to complete the next learning reaction report. So you're going to read chapter 5, and it's going to begin to talk to you about the different networks. You learned about this when you, in week 4, when you started to learn about learner variability, but this goes into greater depth, as UDL is really based on a lot of research, including neuroscience. So week 6 now is going to get into some of that neuroscience and talk to you about engagement and how that really is a shelf of learning. Then you're going to read, watch, and participate in Aleco section 4 of their UDL bootcamp. So this is a lot of information. As you see, it did not automatically take you to section 4. So what I want you to do is you're going to scroll down. Actually, it did take you to section 4, my bad. So it takes you there, but I want you to see where you're at. So there's all this information. If you want to dig, awesome. If not, what I do need you to do is to participate in this area. It's going to talk to you about engagement of learning, representation, and action and expression. So it really is going to hone in on these different areas a lot more and in more depth. Then here are some a video on some UDL case studies, so you can get more of a visual of what it looks like in the classroom. You're going to go ahead and wrap up and complete your learning reaction report. So for this report, you're going to synthesize information from weeks 4 through 6. Here are the guiding questions. Note, these are guiding. You don't have to answer them all, but I definitely want you to address them in a manner that makes sense and that lets me know you understand UDL, you understand the role that you play in UDL, and you understand how you can begin to implement it in the classroom. Last week that we're going to go over, and that the first one is you're going to describe the instructional components of UDL and then explain the implementation considerations of UDL and then create UDL friendly instructional goals. So we're going to wrap this up, right? We're going to start off with chapter 6. Then you're going to watch my video on instructional components. You're going to participate in a Jamboard on UDL standards and goals. You are then going to watch my video on UDL in action. And then there are some optional activities, and you are going to complete another learning reaction report. Okay, so here we have week 6, where we're going to look at the 4 instructional components. So it's goals, it's assessments, it's materials, and it is methods. And you're going to be diving into that and seeing how do the UDL principles, the guidelines, the brain networks, how do these all come together in the classroom? And that is through the instructional components. So you're going to watch this video. This is going to take you through PowerSchool Learning. And you'll notice this has the agenda, and it's going to dive deeper into each one of these areas. And I do use the learning, the theory and the book from UDL, Theory and Practice, as my guide for these videos. So you'll see a lot of the information repeated and reinforced. What you'll do, again, you'll see this side menu. You'll go into goals. You're going to watch the video here. Once you are done, you'll go into assessments. You'll watch the video here. Please note the resources and handouts are on the side. Then there's methods. Same thing. Watch the video and then complete it with materials. Once you are done, you're going to come back here and then you're going to participate in this Jamboard. In this Jamboard, what I want you to do is to develop a UDL goal. I give you an example here. You do have the option of completing a UDL goal either for literacy. If you go to the next slide, it's another literacy goal, but for higher grades. Then there's math. So we have it based on one area of this math standards and then moving on to another, right? What I do want you to do is to remember to put your name on it, because I am going to be including this as part of your learning reaction report. Then here is a compilation. It's UDL in action, and you can go through these here. What you'll see, and I'm actually just going to go to the Google Sites. Is a number of different videos of UDL in action. So I know you kind of saw this in the case studies last week, but here you're going to see different UDL practices in different areas and grade levels. So grade level 1 mathematics, grade level 2, this shows academic choice. So for engagement, SEL, UDL guidelines and practice, grade 5, ELA. This is UDL in action, 5th grade, math, 5th grade. This is, I believe this is a science experiment. This is 6th grade. This is a history lesson, I want to say, or maybe it was an ELA lesson, 7th grade. Menus, differentiated instruction. I believe this one was math. Designing rubrics. I believe this was also math. And this was a social science. And this was, I want to say ELA maybe, or maybe it was another social science class. So if you watch, you can watch any one of these videos to learn about UDL in practice. This is optional. You can watch UDL, you can download and look at Katie Novak's UDL implementation rubric. So if you are interested in beginning to implement this in your classrooms, download this rubric and assess yourself, see where you're at. So this is just for you, right? You're going to want to know, am I, for each member, these are the frameworks. So where do you fall for each under each one of these frameworks? Are you an explorer, or are you all the way over here in idle, right? So wherever you're at, you're going to make goals. Where do you want to get to next? If you're an explorer, you're going to eventually want to be a UDL novice. Once you're a UDL novice, then an intermediate. So checking it up and scaffolding yourself there. And then here's UDL checklist. So when you're designing your instruction, is my instruction UDL friendly? So you can actually go through all of these and it'll tell you, and it'll mark it like, okay, so if I want to have multiple means of representation, am I varying the ways that I display information? And it gives you some examples, and you can either write yes, no, and some comments. And if you have a lot of no's, then maybe go back and make some adjustments to make it more UDL-ish. We are now done with week 7. Please remember, we have another learning reaction report that is due on the 14th. And this one, you are going to tell me how all of these things come together and how you're going to be able to put this into practice, what resonates with you. If you have any questions about any of the material for these modules, please, please, please feel free to reach out. And you guys have a great few weeks, and we will be touching base pretty soon.